Good morning on this Sunday, February 27th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. One-on-one with former Senator David Perdue as he challenges incumbent Governor Brian Kemp in the Republican primary. Also, the three men responsible for the killing of Ahmaud Arbery are also found guilty of committing hate crimes. And state leaders step in to move the proposed $5 billion Rivian plant forward after critics come out in force. Melita, Phil, Theron, and Martha are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Former Senator David Perdue says he's in the race to unite Georgia Republicans, a job he says Governor Kemp hasn't been able to do.
I just don't think he can pull us together. The question then is, if he were really able to do that, wouldn't he have done it already?
Former U.S. Senator David Perdue said he decided to jump into the race for governor to help heal a divided Republican Party. Former President Donald Trump has endorsed Perdue after publicly blaming Kemp for Trump losing the state of Georgia in the 2020 election. Perdue continues to frame himself as an outsider, a strategy that helped him win a U.S. Senate seat in 2014. Governor Kemp's campaign took aim at Perdue for his new TV ads. One of them included a shot of Perdue shaking hands with a former law enforcement officer who was arrested on child porn charges. The footage was from a 2019 school visit Perdue made alongside First Lady Marty Kemp. Perdue says it was a mistake.
It was just a simple mistake. We took it down. I'm really surprised and disappointed the governor wanted to try and make that a political statement.
Now, Perdue says he is the candidate who can beat Stacy Abrams in November because he got 2.4 million votes during his Senate race in 2020 compared to Kemp's 1.9 million in the 2018 governor's race. But we should mention about 1 million more Georgians cast ballots in 2020. Martha, I'll start with you this week. What about this argument that the governor has not been able to unite Republicans?
Well, I tell you what, I'm always in favor of primaries, okay? I think that it makes candidates more accountable to the people. But I think in this case, you know, it's going to be a difficult run for David Perdue. I think he knows that. He's seen it with fundraising. He's seen it with other areas that have happened. But look, the session's in which, of course, the governor is going to be highlighted much more greatly during the session. And then after the session, from April 4th on, we'll have to see what happens.
Well, Theron, let's go over to you because Governor Kemp released new radio ads this week focused on a familiar theme that we've heard Democrats talk about David Perdue, and it's about the outsourcing of jobs. Is this a good strategy?
Well, we remember back in 2014 when David Perdue launched his campaign. He launched his campaign as this successful businessman, and we've got to give him credit. He was the original outsider. He used a term back then that a lot of folks didn't use. But the problem is that, you know, he's been the successful businessman, and what the Kemp campaign successfully did is that they took words out of former President Trump's mouth about outsourcing jobs to China. And at a time where we as a country are worried about what's going on in Ukraine and Russia and China's involvement in this, I think the timing of it was really good. But you know, I think the thing for David Perdue is that it is early, but I agree with Martha. I think that Governor Kemp is utilizing the session to his advantage. But when is the jean jacket going to come back? I mean, I'm waiting to see the jean jacket.
And the Twitter account for the jean jacket.
But he clearly made a mistake, and that's just the culture that we're in right now.
Phil, let's talk about this mistake. I mean, Senator Perdue admitted it was a mistake. At this level of the game, it's tough to make these kinds of mistakes. Will it matter, though?
No, and I think that it's a distraction. I think we're going to be talking about issues. Any one of us on this panel meets people all the time, shakes hands, have pictures. I don't know, you know, if someone's an axe murderer or accused of child molestation. In that instance, Perdue had no idea. So I think we ought to talk about issues and about, you know, Warnock and the Democrats and energy in Ukraine.
So, Melita, let me ask you, would Stacey Abrams at this point rather face Governor Kemp or former Senator Perdue?
I think she's happy to face either of them and stand on the issues she espouses. I think the line in the Kemp ad, he got rich, we got screwed, is priceless. And I think that it was sloppy staff work on the part of the Perdue campaign to let that image be used in a commercial that you were sending up for $1 million ad buy.
Well, and the nastiness, of course, they talked at the beginning that, oh no, we're not going to go after each other personally. We all know that's not true. That never happens. But the nastiness over this, where it was pointed out by the Kemp campaign, then Perdue says, oh yeah, Marty Kemp was at this event. not Perdue, but his staff said Marty Kemp was at this event, and then the Cody Hall answers back, oh yeah, but that was the same event where you told Marty Kemp you're going to support her husband. So it's this kind of nastiness that's going back and forth that's going to get worse.
It is going to get worse for sure. Well, let's turn to the U.S. Senate race, because therein Senator Warnock touts how he can work with Republicans to get things done more as an independent, and clearly going after some of these voters, these independent voters who will likely be very key in this race.
Well, I've heard from a lot of people across the state that are doing polling right now, Lori, and one of the things that has been very consistent is that Senator Warnock's favorability numbers are up. And I think it's because he went to the U.S. Senate, and he zeroed in on issues that Georgians care about. Like this week, he introduced the Gas Prices Relief Act, right? And at a time where we talk about rising gas prices and food being expensive, I think he's going right into the core of the issues that matters to all Americans. And so he's really doing a good job. And he talks about this publicly, not abandoning his Democratic base, because we all in the Democratic Party know that he exemplifies a lot of what we stand for. But he also understands that the people of Georgia sent him to Washington to get things done, and he's introducing legislation, and he's going to be willing to work with Republicans that are sensible enough to work with him on issues that face Georgia.
Phil, what about this strategy? Because he had a very successful strategy with kind of these warm, fuzzy ads, the first go around, and we're kind of seeing those come out again. Right,
but the warm, fuzzy ads aren't going to take away from the fact you've got high gasoline prices, you've got high grocery prices. You've got Warnock, in fact, 4 times last January and February, voted against the Keystone XL pipeline. He's voted to stop all of the drilling and exploration in Alaska. The Biden agenda is to stop, it's fighting fossil fuels and to stop energy development. We were energy independent under Trump, and Warnock has just been a puppet of Biden. That'll come back to haunt him.
Melita, let's talk about that. I mean, how much of these national issues will play a role in this U.S. Senate race?
I think they'll play a big role, but I think you have to remember that Herschel Walker was standing beside the former president on Wednesday night as the invasion of Ukraine was happening, as the president criticized Biden and praised Putin. So I think and Gary Black had a very good comment this week when he said, we need a senator who can put a staff together, not a staff to put a candidate together.
I want to respond to that. He did not praise Putin. He said he was a genius and he is acting smartly.
Sounds like praise.
But let me finish, because if you read the whole context, I actually did, and I talked to Rick Grinnell, who was at the dinner when he said those remarks. He also said Putin was evil and authoritarian, but I mean, Hitler was an evil genius, Stalin was. So all of this was taken out of context. He was not praising Putin.
Look, the bottom line is Senator Warnock, from a political standpoint, needs to be thought of again as Christmas lights and puppies. Okay, so the first several issues he took up were very far left. Okay, now he's coming back more to the middle, and I can tell you from folks that I've talked to, they are very shocked around Senator Warnock that Herschel Walker is polling as well as he is against him. They never expected that. Okay, and so I think that Senator Warnock is doing the right thing close to an election, right? Getting more moderate in the things that he's approaching. But from a political standpoint, they've got a really hard road to fight, because they really thought they'd be way ahead at this point.
Theron, weigh in here, because I know your eyes went up.
Yeah, I think I respectfully disagree with Martha, and because he is more than just puppies and Christmas lights, right? And let's put this in context. I mean, he was a genius, because he actually.
It's brilliant, because anybody can say puppies and Christmas lights, and they know it's Senator Warnock.
But he's a member of a club of, he's one of 100 in a very elite club of U.S. senators in the country. So let's pay him respect in that regards. But I do think that the popularity, I am hearing the same thing about Herschel Walker, but I think the key with Senator Warnock is that once it becomes debate time, and once Herschel Walker has to be more than a Hall of Fame football player who's friends with Trump, I think that's where his U.S. Senate experience and leading on these tough issues is going to break through.
But I think also Herschel Walker, the appeal is he will be a plain speaker, right? He speaks to audiences in a conversational manner, and I think he's going to be undergoing a lot of training when it comes to these debates. So
we'll see.
And he'll have trouble defending that Biden record that he always supports 100%.
I think what I'm also hearing is that Senator Warnock has done a good job of sort of striking his independence away from Biden, because don't get me wrong, he supports the president on some things, but this legislation that he just introduced, I mean, he just introduced increasing the amount of money that people can actually get and not have to spend less on insulin, medicine. These are the type of things that I think this senator is doing.
But what you've been hearing around the state is more about how Senator Ossoff has worked with people and worked with Republicans. And I really think that what Senator Warnock's doing is taking a page from the praise that Senator Ossoff is getting for working with Republicans and trying to do more of that. You can't say that initially he was doing that.
No,
he wasn't.
He was not. You're right. And he is who he is, right? I mean, you look at this long decades of history in Georgia. I mean, he was registering voters for a lot of people, like Helen Butler. He was out there with people like that before Stacey Abrams did it. So he's not abandoning his core Democratic principles, but I think the man understands he's got to get reelected.
We'll leave it there because there's a lot to talk about in the next couple of months. This is what makes this show so interesting. Coming up, another guilty verdict in a case centered on the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. We'll discuss straight ahead.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
It took a jury less than 4 hours to return guilty verdicts in a federal hate crimes trial against the 3 men responsible for the death of Ahmaud Arbery. Theron, I'll go over to you first because I don't think a lot of us were surprised by these verdicts.
Well, we weren't surprised, and I think that what it shows, Lori, is that this type of bigotry that we saw down in southeast Georgia and Glenn County cannot just not be tolerated in this state, but it cannot be tolerated in this country. And so I think this was the right decision, and ultimately I think it sent a strong message to everyone in the country that if you identify someone and decide to target them based on race and ultimately murder them the way that Ahmaud Arbery was murdered, and had it not been for that videotape, I keep going back to this, his family would have never received justice, and these men probably would have gotten off because they had a lot of help from the then DA who was in place at the time.
Martha, the 3 defendants now face possible life sentences for these crimes.
Yeah, so they already have, 2 of them already have life without parole. And, you know, that's one of the challenges with any kind of hate crime convictions because it's on top of what's already happened. So I think it's more of a statement for the family. They want to go after the district attorney now, which I think she should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And, you know, hopefully we can move on from this. But I always bring this up when we talk about Ahmaud Arbery. For months, the people of Brunswick had peaceful prayer in the courthouse as a protest. They got no credit for that. Hardly anyone covered it, and they should be lifted up because of that.
I think there was a lot of coverage on the fact that Brunswick did it right.
Yeah.
I think they did get a lot of credit for that.
They got a new mayor down there, Cosby Johnson, who's a great guy.
You know, just a quick footnote. I think it was no surprise. I would agree with that. But I do. It was a majority white jury, and I'm tired of this left-wing narrative that we're systematically racist and that
in both trials.
And so, you know, they did the right thing, and I just think that destroys the narrative of the left, and I like that.
All right, Melita.
Well, I love that the jury elected a black social worker as their foreperson. And I also think that if the statues of Lady Justice around a courthouse were animated, Lady Justice would have been hiding her eyes and bowing her head in shame that the 2 McMichaels both had worked in district attorney offices in the past and had those attitudes which were exposed by this trial. So it's going to take a while for this community to heal from the division the trial exposed. It's been there all along, but this trial really brought it to light.
Well, I want to switch gears to the Georgia Senate, which passed a Parents' Bill of Rights this week. Phil, critics say this isn't necessary because parents can already look at instructional materials.
Well, that's a myth that parents can do that, and there's some school boards, local school boards, that are transparent. Others are not. I gave the example on this show a few weeks ago where we found out in Gwinnett County where they were teaching this divisive CRT, critical race theory, and Marxist thought. No one knew about it, and they had to erase it from their website. Where's the transparency there? So this is definitely needed, and people have a right to speak out. Martha and I have been talking about this on the show, that they try to shut people down, and these are parents that deserve to know what's going on.
Melita, let me ask you this, because I think that some of the Republicans have really tapped into this issue that gets at the heart to parents, right? Like taking control of their education. It was successful, we saw in Virginia. What about that strategy here in Georgia?
Well, I'm sure that the Republicans will use it, but these new laws, some of them truly are already covered in existing law. This is red meat for the Republican base. It's a way for them to connect with their base and motivate their voters.
Don't you think it's just the right thing, though, to have people speak out?
Let me tell you what, it is not red meat for the Republican base. It is red meat for parents with children. And those are not just Republicans. The voter bloc that is going to decide elections in 2022 is going to be parents with children. And when they are asked, who has got your back? I think they're going to say Republicans. At least give them a try. That's what a lot of people are saying, is that, hey, just give us a try for this election. And the message is getting through with parents and children.
So, Theron, along a similar line, a Georgia House committee passed a bill that's banning the teaching of, quote, divisive concepts in public schools. Now, this move, as Phil had mentioned, this move does stem from this critical race theory. But are the Republicans tapping into something here that they know will be successful for them?
Well, just another thing to emphasize Melita's point, and I disagree with Phil. Critical race theory is not being taught in our public school systems in Georgia, period.
They're trying to get it in, and you know that.
But where they are teaching it is in private schools. So Republicans got to be very careful that if you keep pushing this very divisive language in these bills, that you're going to be deemed as anti-public school and you're going to be anti-public school teachers. But here's what I said, Lori, and I've said this to you privately. We as Americans, we can't cherry pick our history. We can't ignore slavery. We can't ignore the displacements of Native Americans. We can't ignore all the bad things that come along with our American history. Now, we can celebrate the good things, and we can celebrate how far we've come. I mean, the fact that I'm sitting here as the only African American on this panel should be celebrated.
But no one is saying that we should ignore history.
But those things are, because I'm a parent of a school-age child, those things are being taught in school.
No, yeah, but my point is, you can't silence the history that represents our country, and that's what this bill is doing. It's basically trying to say, and they're deeming what's divisive. And this thing is, parents and teachers already play a pivotal role in education, right?
So you like to teach that races should be against one another under critical race theory? That is so divisive.
That
is critical race theory.
But that's not being
that is
taught.
not.
It is. I just gave you the example of Gwinnett County, and you don't care about
Phil, that's false.
We exposed it.
The bottom line is this: I think you can celebrate where we are as a country now, but you can't ignore the past, and you got to tell it and make it plain, like my grandmother would say, right? And tell it in its totality. And there are some dark moments in history that we cannot run away from.
We are teaching
anyone's
that
history.
already.
Yeah.
All right, we'll leave it there, guys. Thank you. Well, coming up, after a lot of community backlash, the state steps in to take the lead on the development of the proposed $5 billion Rivian plant. We'll discuss straight ahead.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
As pressure mounts from the opponents of the proposed Rivian plant, state economic development leaders are stepping in to help move this project forward. There are some folks in this area, which is about an hour east of Atlanta. They don't want to see their lives upended.
Well, I think Melita did a good job, and everybody, I think Phil pointed out some things, and Brian did as well last week about this Rivian plant, and particularly the area in which it's going to be sort of built. And so I think what we saw as a response from that show is that a lot of these folks who, quite frankly, haven't really been heard, it was escalated. However, I do think that the governor's staff and putting together this committee was the right thing, because you got to make sure that you have people in place that can be on the offense about job creation, but also these concerns by these residents have got to be addressed.
Martha, will the state listen to the concerns of these residents? Because isn't this a done deal?
It's a done deal, and of course this piece of property was set aside for this kind of development for a long period of time and was empty, as I recall it. I could be wrong about that, but I think that was the case. So it wasn't like it was a big surprise that something might go there someday, but I think they will listen to them, but it doesn't mean it will change anything. The deal's been done, the ink's been signed, all of that.
Melita.
But it's looking more like a steamroll than a streamline, because what the state did is step in just before the Planning Commission was going to impose about 25 additional restrictions on the development of the property about water quality and that sort of thing. And so the people of Madison Morgan County will not even have the opportunity to be heard in front of their county commission, in front of their local planning board when this is discussed, because the state has stepped in and taken control.
Phil, will they be heard?
I think they will be heard, and I think the debate obviously has now begun. I would make 2 points. I would criticize the Joint Development Authority of the 4 counties there, and also our friends with economic development. I think they should have had a PR campaign to go into the communities, and they should have said, here's what we're going to do, this is how we're going to invest in the community, and these are all of the attributes. And there were no, zoning was not figured out. They didn't have, and I agree, environmental concerns are very important to everybody too in this rural area. I think that that's where they're going to have to really lay out what we're going to do, how Rivian is going to be this huge economic benefit, and perhaps how do you give back to the community, like the schools are going to be impacted. And so I think there's a PR job to be told.
The PR goes both ways. You got to listen and you got to talk.
I think we all know a couple good firms out there.
I know.
That's right.
I'm just saying.
You know, I'm just
We
saying.
all are in the communications
Should we
business.
ball,
I'm
Phil?
just
That was
saying.
Did you like the way? Yeah, that was good.
All right, I want to switch gears because, and I'm quoting here, this is the dumbest thing I have ever seen. That's how Speaker David Ralston declared a move by the American Federation for Children. The group sent out mailers tying some Republicans to Stacy Abrams, and that ticked off not just the Speaker, but many of his Republican colleagues who all declared the voucher bill dead for this legislative session. Speaking of communication, Martha, let's talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, look, this was a group that was formerly chaired by Betsy DeVos, and I spoke to the speaker on my program the week before last, and he did say that his focus for this session is the budget, the mental health bill, and that there's going to be some social issues that aren't going to get through. And then this happened. So I'm thinking, this kind of fits into what's happening. I'm disappointed about it because I like school choice. Even though I'm a member of the State Board of Education, I think it makes school systems better. In Hall County, we have a all-choice school system, a charter school system where kids can do all kinds of different things, from language academies to chef school and everything in between in a public school. So, we'll see what happens here, but I think if the speaker says it's dead for this session, it's dead.
Phil's got his hand up.
Well, we're talking about House Bill 999, and I also favor parental choice too, but I didn't like the way it was structured. Basically what these are, $6,000 of scholarships per student if you're in a public school for 6 weeks. There's no oversight. The parent would control this, and there was no vetting, or there was no oversight as to who would get it. Would illegal immigrants? We got a huge illegal immigrant population that have to be educated in K through 12. That's more free stuff for them. I'm getting tired of free stuff.
Melita, final words here, because I covered the legislature for 13 years. This voucher bill has, in several different forms, has always been introduced and goes nowhere.
That's right.
I think it's a good thing it's dead, and I also think it's a good thing to see the speaker push back about misleading mailers. It's a good reminder to all of the groups who would send mailers out during the coming campaign season about being careful about who your audience is and what you're trying to achieve.
Gosh, just a lot of free communications advice from the show today. All right, thanks everybody. Coming up, we'll have winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
All right, we got 2 cameras this week, so we're doing a little better than last week. Theron, my apologies, because we missed your birthday.
It's totally
so
fine.
I'm giving you a shout out and a very big happy birthday.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you all so much. I appreciate
And
it.
for that, I'll let you go first.
Well, I'll be quick. And speaking of birthdays, you all know how near and dear Congressman Lewis is still to me and was, but he would have been 82. So his birthday was February 21st. And they launched the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation this week, which is going to continue to put forth his wife and his vision around civil rights and social justice. They're going to have a big event in D.C. in May. And then also I want to, again, make Senator Warnock a winner. I talked about how he introduced 2 pieces of legislation. One is going to lower gas prices temporarily by suspending the federal gas tax, and the other one is putting a cap on people who need to afford their insulin. And so I definitely think he's the winner of the
He was
week.
going to make sure he got it in.
Yes.
All right, Phil, take it away.
Loser, Senator Raphael Warnock, for always opposing energy programs. He's been hitting the fossil fuel industry. He doesn't want any more fracking and clean liquid natural gas. However, I've got a winner. You'll be happy with this. DeKalb County CEO Michael Thurmond. This is quite a different from DeKalb County 10 years ago. ago. He's got a great budget. He includes some money for law enforcement, anti-gang activity. And my loser is Ted Terry, who's a commissioner, used to be mayor of Clarkston, who just was total. We talk about civility. He's insulting. Thurmond rarely said it was just an outrage and didn't know he was just a horrible person. So loser, Ted Terry.
Well, that drama was on my list. We just didn't get to address it. So thank you. Melita.
My winner of the week is the Georgia comedian Blair Erskine, who's moved to LA to work on Jimmy Kimmel's show, but she skewered Candace Taylor's Jesus, Guns, and Babies campaign with brilliant satire that attracted more than 900,000 views this week. And then my loser is Candace Taylor, who didn't realize she was the butt of a joke and put it into her cringeworthy digital ad. So if you're going to Google this and watch, just don't take a sip of anything before you do.
All right, Martha, over to you.
I'm in a good mood today, and I did all my negative stuff in the show. I want to make my winner Ron Gant. He signed a baseball card for my grandson, and he's right here at Fox 5 Atlanta. So he is a big winner for me. And the Beulah Rucker is one of the women that I've worked for her foundation for the last 15 years. She was a black woman who started a secondary school in 1911 that was a boarding school, did amazing work, and a hall in Gainesville High School was dedicated to her history this week. So she's a winner. And then finally, Herschel Walker, even though you didn't like the first part about he said he didn't like either candidate, the second part, he said everybody get out to vote.
Leave it there. Have a great week.